Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and gifted animals, welcome to Rock Solid Productions, where in this video we have a shootout of shootouts. We have the Retrobit Super Retro Trio 3 Plus versus the Hyperkin RetroN 3 HD. Which will come out on top? Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Rock Solid Productions. Now, if this is your first time to the channel, I just want to take a second and say thank you for stopping by and checking out what we do have going on here with this video. If you like what you see here, I invite you to check out some of the other videos that we have here on the channel, including individual unboxings and reviews of both of the systems that you will see here today. If you really like what you see here, do me a huge favor. Hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that bell notification, and that way you are kept the most up to date with everything we have going on here in the channel. One of the things I want to know too, between both of these systems, which one do you think wins? Let me know down in the comment section. So we have had people ask for a long time if we are going to do a comparison between the Retrobit Super Retro Trio 3 Plus and the RetroN 3 HD, and that is this video here. Now, both systems are hardware-based clone emulation systems. So basically what that means is it actually plays the cartridge off of the cartridge. It's not dumping the ROM or anything like that. That would be like the RetroN 5. These are basically what's called an SoC, or a system on a chip. Both systems are trying from a hardware standpoint to duplicate the performance of the original Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Famicom, and Genesis or Mega Drive. Each one does so in a little bit of a different way. Now, the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus is about a year and a half, 2 years old at this point, where the RetroN 3 HD just came out several weeks ago, at least at the time of this filming. Not making excuses, just kind of laying it out there for you. Also, one thing I just want to be completely transparent on, Retrobit did send me the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus for review back in 2018. I believe is when we reviewed that. Now, the RetroN 3 HD, that I did purchase with my own money. That's not going to weigh into the winners or loser in this whatsoever, just being completely transparent. Both systems very similarly priced. Now, at the time of this recording, Retrobit does have another version of the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus coming. I don't believe it is shipped yet. The main difference, a little bit lower cost, and it does not have the composite video outputs on the back. Other than that, exactly the same machine. So something to be aware of if you are shopping for a system. Price-wise too, they're pretty similar, within $5, $10 of each other. So we're going to start out here. First of all, we're going to throw both of them on the bench, compare them side by side, see features we like about each one, see things that we wish would be improved, and then we're going to actually do some side-by-side gameplay. So let's get started. So checking out both systems here on the bench, they're pretty similar in size. The Super Retro Trio 3 Plus a little bit thicker this way, but the RetroN 3 HD a little bit deeper that way. They each have 3 different slots for the different systems. Here you have Genesis and Mega Drive. Here you have Super NES, Super Famicom. Here you have NES. On the RetroN 3 HD, you have Super NES, Super Famicom. Then you have Mega Drive, Genesis, and then you have NES. No real big difference one to the other there, just different layouts here. Obviously, color palette wise, you have the white with red accents. In the EU, they got, I believe it's black and blue. We'll have a picture of that popped up here. And then with the RetroN 3 HD, you do have either the smoke red or a smoke black casing. Exactly the same systems either way. The black and blue one for the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, that is the PAL variant versus this is NTSC, but it'll do both. More on that in a little bit. Now, a couple things that I do want to talk about as far as how each system does things a little bit differently. I want to kind of point out here the power functionality. On the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, basically it's just a slide switch. You want to play Genesis, slide up to Genesis, Super NES, or NES. The power switch is also the switch to determine what system you're playing. On the RetroN 3 HD, you have the slide switch here, which determines your system that you're playing, and then you have a separate power button. For me, just because this is what I'm more familiar with, I prefer this over this, and even on Hyperkin's own RetroN 2 HD, they have just a switch very similar to this, where middle is off, top I think is NES, bottom is Super NES, but I could have that backwards on there. So just as far as that functionality wise, I do like that a little bit more on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus over the RetroN 3. Just so you know how I am doing this, while I have some ideas in my mind while I'm going through this, I'm actually just taking a sheet of paper and I'm going to be tallying up different points for each one. So for example, with that power switch, we're going to do SRT3 Plus, so we're going to do a point for the switch. And we'll just keep a track of that as we go along. Now, both systems will accommodate the original controllers for the system that is emulating. Let's look first at the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, because they have a neat little kind of protector shroud here that you pop in and then it comes out. And here you can see that it has two Super NES, two Genesis, two Mega Drive ports, and then two NES ports right there. And then you have this slide switch between whether you're going to use NES, Super NES, or Genesis, or whether you're using Super NES, and more on that in a little bit. You have a slide switch here for NTSC, PAL in Europe, NTSC-J, and PAL in Australia, I believe is that last one. So that's what you have for controller ports on here, nice and straightforward. On the RetroN 3 HD, you do have your two Super NES style controller ports on this side, and then on this side here you have NES ports, and on the Genesis side you have Genesis ports on here too. So it still will work with all the exact same controllers that this one here will. It's a little bit less convenient to put something into an entertainment center that maybe this is, butted up against here, because you don't necessarily have access to the controller ports on the side. So for the controller port layout, I again have to give it to the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus. Now, we can't talk about the controller ports without talking about the included controllers. Now, both include two controllers. On the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, it includes its own 4-button controller with two shoulder buttons up here, definitely inspired by the Super NES controller, and it does have a Super NES controller type port here. That is where on the front of the system, the switch that says Super NES, that's when you're using this controller here. You just slide that switch into the Super NES port over there. If you're using regular Super NES controllers or NES or Genesis, you move it over to the right. It's very comfortable. It's actually the same controller that they include with the Super Retrocade, just with a different end on it here. I like the D-pad. The buttons are clicky. I like the fact it's concave, convex. Overall, pretty comfortable, and you do get two of these. Now, Hyperkin has actually included their Scout and their Squire Super NES and Genesis controllers with the RetroN 3 HD, which is great. These are awesome controllers on their own. They have that same kind of see-through casing as what the system itself does. Just overall, very good controllers. Again, concave, convex, good comfort on here as well. As far as the overall fit and feel of both controllers, these are awesome. I really, really dig these. The one bummer, and first of all, let's say I give the edge to Hyperkin for just the included controllers, because I do think they're more comfortable. I like this controller. These are just better, at least from a comfort standpoint. However, with this controller here, you can play NES, Super NES, and Genesis games on this system, nothing else needed. With the RetroN 3 HD, you have to use the Super NES Scout controller with the Super NES Super Famicom. You have to use the Squire with the Genesis Mega Drive games, and, well, there's only two controllers included, which means you can't play NES games on the RetroN 3 HD as it comes out of the box, as there's no included controller for it. Now, you can use Hyperkin's own Cadet controller on this system. It's a good controller. It's comfortable, it works well, you know, along the same lines as these two guys here. It's just not included. Above and beyond that, you can use any regular NES compatible controller with this system, and it works just fine. But for not including a way to play NES games out of the box, I do have to give another point to the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus. So let's set the controllers aside here, because a couple other things we need to look at on the systems themselves, and that's first and foremost on the back of both of them. So here on the back of the RetroN 3 HD, you can see you have micro USB input for power, you do have composite video output, HDMI output, and then 4x3 16:9 switch. Overall, pretty convenient right out of the box. I do dig the fact that it is micro USB. USB-C would be really nice to see moving forward since this is a newer system, but there's still plenty of people who have that cable. And then for people who do want to hook this system up to a CRT or older television, the fact that it does have composite, definitely a plus on here. On the back of the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, you also have micro USB for power. Very cool. You have, at least on this version of the system, you still have composite video output. Like I mentioned in the intro, there is a new version coming that omits these at a reduced price, and then you do have your HDMI output right here. Now, no 4x3 16:9 switch, so just from that alone, you know, from the ports, I've got to give the edge here to the Super RetroN 3. Now, on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, there are no additional like ports or switches or anything like that on the bottom. It's just the bottom of the system. On the RetroN 3 HD, however, you have your NTSC PAL switch for the Super NES, for Sega, and for the NES. Now, on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, it does have all of those exact same ports or switches like I mentioned earlier on. It's simply right here on the face of the unit. So that's the overview of the systems as a whole. Let's get to some game playing. Starting out here with the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, and one thing you'll notice right off the bat, 16:9. Now, when this initially came out and everything, talking to Retrobit, their kind of solution was, well, simply go ahead on your TV and switch it from 4x3 or from 16:9 to 4x3. Not all TVs have that functionality. Like my Samsung that I have here has it, not a problem. My Vizio that I have down in my living room does not have it. So for me, everything is stretched out into 16:9 mode playing this. So we are going to go to Super Mario Brothers first, simply because, again, that's one of the best tests for the coins. And there you can hear it is pitched high. It has that reverse duty cycle issue. I will say overall color palette does not look bad. Whoop, I missed a jump there. Overall, you know, color palette does not look bad to me. Mario looks sharp. Maybe at least, and it could be the way that I have my color palette set up here on my TV. He looks, I'm going to pause it here, he looks a little green. So something to keep in mind there. Now, one other thing to keep in mind, wow, I missed that again, is on this, I am actually using the Hyperkin Wireless Cadet, and the reason for that, now if you saw my recent review of the RetroN 3 HD, I talked about how I got one hell of a shock that went through and zapped out the Genesis controller. Well, I have had the same thing happen here on my Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, and it's taken out the stock controller that comes with it. So that's why I'm using this with this, and you'll see me use other controllers throughout. But here you can see and hear what it sounds like on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus playing Super Mario Brothers. Visually not bad, but it does have that same reverse duty cycle issue that other clones have. So we're going to pause this, and now we are going to switch on over to the RetroN 3 HD. Alright, aspect ratio wise, you can see this is how it's supposed to look, but you can also see the colors a lot darker, a lot muddier. Now I am using the same cable, the same cartridge and everything throughout all of these tests. I am using an M cable into my capture card, and we'll listen to the coins. There you can see even higher pitch still. And well, I think the background looks good. You know, look at Mario here again. I noticed that, or mentioned that he looked kind of green in the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus. In this, he looks really muddy and brown. Here again, going through, letting you hear the coins and everything on there. I mean, overall, I think the color palette, and I've said this in the past, I think the color palette looks better on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, at least on Super Mario Brothers. Well, both audio on both systems is off. I think it is less off on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus as on the RetroN 3 HD. Now we're going to go through about to the same point we did just a moment ago with the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus. All right, so there you hear that. Now, one thing I will say, we're going to pause it here. Neither system gets past level 2 on Battletoads, so that's the same across the board. Next thing we are going to check out on both systems, we're going to stick on the NES side, and we're going to check out a PAL game. I almost threw in my copy of Marble Madness, but I wanted to throw in Darkwing. Again, 16:9 here on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus. Now, listening to the audio, it sounds fast. Now, I have switched the switch to PE, PAL Europe. It should adjust the clock speed, and it hasn't. So we're going to take on Quackerjack's level. It's just the one I'm most familiar with, and we can kind of fly through here. I can confirm that this is playing fast, so it did not adjust the clock speed of the system to PAL like it should have, which to me, I like and I don't like. See, part of it is I have gotten so used to playing this game as a 50 hertz game on a 60 hertz system through my HDMI modded NES. So I've got to say I'm kind of used to this. Now, Darkwing, I think, looks good. The color palette and everything looks pretty accurate, actually, on here. He's pretty purple. Oof. Just about fell to my death there. All right, awesome. We are going to get to Quackerjack here. Now, and that's the main thing here, too, is this gun is, like, imperative to have to beat him, because otherwise he will jump up on levels and it's hard to hit him. That should do it. So we beat Quackerjack here on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus. Now let's see how it looks and sounds on the RetroN 3 HD. So here you can see on the title screen for Darkwing Duck, much, much darker. But again, 4:3, that does make a difference. Also, listen to the music. It's playing at the right speed. I have set the NTSC PAL switch to PAL, and it is playing at the correct speed now, but considerably darker palette here. I can definitely see it on Darkwing. Now, some of this I can clearly adjust on my TV itself if I wanted to, but just natively it's interesting to see the difference in the palettes on the systems right out of the box. Ooh, free guy. It is definitely a challenge going back and forth from, oh, as I drop down the pit. I don't know why I didn't grab the hook there, but it's definitely a challenge going from the PAL to the NTSC version, just because the game does play slower. So you're trying to make moves and everything at a speed that you would normally make if you're playing a... Why is he not grabbing that? So you're trying to play a PAL game at normal NTSC speeds versus, like, I've gotten so acclimated at playing the PAL games faster. That was the weirdest thing ever, how he was not wanting to grab the hook. I think not only Darkwing, but here you can even notice the backgrounds are considerably darker. I'll wait for that guy to fly by. There you can just see how dark the bat is compared to the backgrounds It is very hard to get past that without taking a hit from that last bat. Again, here you'll notice the audio kind of soften. I think it has to do with the audio that's tied into those rollers kind of moving, because once they go off screen, the audio comes back. If you're a fan of the Mega Man series of games, cannot recommend Darkwing Duck highly enough. Just an amazingly fun game. All right, let's try Quackerjack now on the RetroN 3 HD. I got changed. There we go. Got him. So I was able to get through the first level with both of them. So on this, I would say I thought that I do like the fact that on the RetroN 3 HD, it's the right speed, and the fact it's 4:3, not 16:9. But I do prefer the color palette on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus. So now let's switch to a Famicom game using a 60 to 72 pin adapter. Now neither system plays Famicom games right out of the box. You need that 60 to 72 pin adapter, but I just wanted to show how it looks and sounds. So here is the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus again, 16:9. Probably not going to mention that again because it's 16:9 throughout the whole game, or every system. I think color-wise this actually looks pretty decent. I mean, Kirby looks his normal pinkish self like he should look and everything. Oh, you jerk face. Oh, alright, I thought that I was going to die there and I didn't, which is good. But yeah, you can play Famicom games. There we go. I actually have this complete in box for the NES, and I don't know that I've ever spent more than a couple minutes with it. Obviously I also have it for the Game Boy too. That's what that looks like on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus. Let's check out the RetroN 3 HD. So kind of be expected here again on Kirby, much darker color palette and everything, as we've seen on the other games to this point. Much like the 4:3 16:9, you know, we've mentioned it, probably not going to mention it again going through this. Both systems feel really, nice and responsive, not a major issue there with either one. Pink puffball and everything kind of going through here, and all right, we got a power up there, so we got the fire. I mean, overall, I like the fact that, we have the 4:3 16:9 option here on the system, but from a color palette standpoint and everything, I really do prefer the way that the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus looks on the NES and Famicom side of things. All right, so at this point, what we're going to do, we're going to actually switch up and we are going to go to the Super NES, Super Famicom side of things. And much like this system, we're going to check out both NTSC and PAL games on it. So I don't want to say that I was expecting this, but I was expecting this. So this is my copy of Yoshi's Island from AB Games in Germany. And as you can see, the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, well, it won't play it. Here, however, you can see the RetroN 3 HD plays it just fine. So that is an advantage that the RetroN 3 HD does have, is I think the compatibility with games, especially on the Super NES side of things, a little bit better than what the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus has on board. Again, almost 2 years newer, so I'm sure that they've built up that library a little bit more. Here you can also see, works with the Game Genie on the Super NES side. No issues whatsoever there. So the room that I film in, it's an electrostatic discharge hell. I get shocks in here all the time. It tends to be fairly dry. The material on this couch and everything tends to make shocks more likely and everything. Well, shortly after I did my review of the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, I was just playing it on a regular night. I went to change games, grabbed the controller, got one hell of a shock. After that, the stock controllers don't work for me. Very similar to the issue I ran into with the Squire on the RetroN 3 HD. So as such, I'm actually using the Hyperkin controller with the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus. That being said, under normal circumstances, I would be using the stock controller. I like the stock controller. It just, for some reason, is not working with this system for right now. So I did want to throw in the Super Game Boy here and play some Donkey Kong and just see how it works. Now, I'm actually surprised on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, this actually looks dark. I mean, it's not terrible, but it definitely does look darker than kind of what I'm used to playing with other systems. I definitely want to spend more time with this game. Super fun. Good to see here that the Super Game Boy, it does work. Let's check out how this looks on the RetroN 3 HD. Donkey Kong Color on the Game Boy, or the Super Game Boy. I think this looks a little bit dark, but it doesn't look much different, to me at least, than the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus. Yeah, especially there on the red brick, it looks pretty similar to me. Now, I've had that issue a couple of times where, you know, it has where I'm going up the ladder versus just side by side. It's like it's too sensitive on the D-pad between left and up. But it's the same controller. There, it did it again. I'm using the same controller with both systems, so I don't know why it's doing that. And there you can see I can bring up the menu for the different palettes and everything. There we go. Finally got up to Pauline. I don't know why I was struggling with that so much with this. All right, moving on. So just on a whim, I actually grabbed my other Retrobit controller that came with my system, plugged it in. Controller works just fine. It has to do with the other controller. It's literally the exact same thing that happened with the Squire. It knocks something out in the controller itself. This is my Super Famicom version of Street Fighter II Turbo, so we will see how this plays. Oh, he got me with the Yoga Flame. Pretty good on Dalsim there. Weird, I don't know what it is about shocks, electrostatic discharges that are knocking out controllers for me, but I'm glad to know that it's the controller and not the system. Got him. Pretty straightforward there on Street Fighter II Turbo, the Super Famicom version. Let's try it out on the RetroN 3 HD. So the reason why I use Street Fighter II Turbo to test this is lag, latency, delay, things like that. That's something that in fighting games you can always feel. So again, you know, cool thing, we've got Dalsim again, so we can see, you know, basically head to head, going against the exact same characters, you know, basically how we do. Dang it, I wanted to get that perfect. I was so close. Almost a perfect there on Dalsim. Got him. Now, I did try to pull off the Dragon Uppercut there, and I couldn't. Now, in my full-blown review, I did. So I think it's more of me trying to go through and doing the moves too quickly and having it not work as well there. Now, let's get a little groovy. Threw you off there a little bit, didn't I? You probably thought, talking groovy, I was going Earthworm Jim. No, 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 no. We're going to do some Donkey Kong Country just because I've been playing a little bit of this lately, and I forgot how great of a game, not that I forgot, but it's an amazing game. I think the color palette still, again, on this, it looks very good. Audio-wise and everything, sounds great. This, again, I said it recently in our review of the RetroN 3 HD. It's amazing how great this game still holds up almost 30 years later. But again, I think you'll agree that the color palette, the the audio and everything, it looks really good. If you have the ability to go to 4:3 on your TV itself, I think it'd be a no-brainer. Now let's switch to the RetroN 3 HD. Now the red hues on this to me look dark, at least looking at my TV. Something that I did mention in our full-blown review was the fact that I didn't think the colors were quite as vibrant on this as on the original hardware. It does seem like the music may be a little bit quieter on the RetroN 3 HD. I hadn't noticed it until here. Yeah, it does seem a little bit quieter to me using the same volume settings and everything on my TV. I haven't changed that at all. Hopefully you can kind of hear that as well watching this. Such an amazing game. All right, so now we are going to switch to the Genesis side of things. So we're firing up our EverDrive here. We are going to play some Double Dragon here. Now, when we originally reviewed the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, I did not have an EverDrive. Thanks to Jason, aka Vorange, for sending us one and donating one to the channel. Dude, you rock. We would not be able to test out Genesis EverDrives if not for you. Don't forget that. So let's test this out here. Okay, this must be a ROM hack or something, because I've never seen this before, and this is not what I had expected. Okay, but it is playing on here. All right, we are going to switch on over to the RetroN 3 HD. So it does work with Genesis ROMs here on the EverDrive. So as expected here, because we've actually tested this out recently here on this, we do have, you know, good compatibility with an EverDrive here on the RetroN 3 HD. We're gonna, oh, I guess I got moved to a different location. We'll see what happens here. Do me a favor, if you've ever seen this game before, let me know. I think this is just a ROM hack or just a custom game. Or homebrew, I guess is what I should say. But it does play just fine here on the RetroN 3 HD. I hate the fact I keep mixing up their names, but this is the RetroN 3 HD. One thing I do want to check out is if the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus will play Master System ROMs. So we're just going to go and grab, you know, whatever we have here. So here's the interesting thing on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus is the fact that I have the country set to NTSC for US, and it's displaying the color palette properly. A lot of times you have to set the basically the region code to another region for it to work properly. I've actually never played the Master System version of Sonic before. Now I am seeing some artifacting at the top of the screen. I'm going to pause it here. Or I can't actually. So if you look basically straight above and just a tick to the right of Sonic's head, you can see that kind of flashing stuff. I don't know what's going on there. That's kind of bizarre. But it's interesting to see that you can leave the system set to NTSC and Master System games will work, unlike other systems where you have to set it to PAL essentially. Nice thing means is the fact that it will run at the proper speed. Aside from being 16:9 instead of 4:3, this and that little bit of artifacting there, this does not look bad at all. We are going to move on and test it out on the RetroN 3 HD. Although I'm really enjoying playing this and don't necessarily want to quit. So here you can see the display with the RetroN 3 HD, what it looks like when you have it set to NTSC, which obviously is the wrong color palette. Let's try NTSC J. Same thing. There's PAL. So while it does work with, the system set in PAL mode, it's now also running at PAL speed, so it's running at 50 versus 60 hertz. So it's a little bit slower than what you would have on the RetroN 3H or the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus. That's a bummer, especially after I will admit, I knew this was the case with this after our review of the RetroN 3 HD, that it plays the Master System ROMs in PAL mode, essentially, that it does not play it in NTSC mode. But even still, I was kind of surprised that the RetroN or the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus actually plays it at the right speed in NTSC mode. Alright, so what's the tally? Now, just so you guys know, this is actually my Genesis Mini playing it back, and as I mentioned earlier on too, all the video that you saw, all captured the same way, using the same power supply, same power cable, and was using the same M cable. I was swapping them back and forth. So you were seeing same cartridges between both systems as well. So what I gave points to for the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, I prefer the switch and power mechanism versus having the separate system selector switch and a power button. There were a couple times where when I was going back and forth, I actually switched the switch down on the RetroN 3 HD versus hitting the power button. Just personal preference. It's kind of what I've gotten used to. It's kind of the norm, so I like that switch mechanism better on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus. The port layout and everything, prefer on this versus on the RetroN 3 HD. With everything on front, it's just easier to fit and work with in an entertainment system. The included controllers, these are awesome. The ones that come with the Hyperkin RetroN 3 HD, the Scout and the Squire, great controllers. The ones that come with the Retrobit Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, still really, really good. The nice thing on both of them, well, all three of them really, because you have the Genesis, Super NES, and then the Retrobit own, all 10-foot cables. So definitely a good thing there, but I did give a point to the Super Retro Trio 3, or to the RetroN 3 HD. Controller compatibility, it's pretty much a wash on both of them, although you can use this controller that comes with the system with everything the system will play, whereas on the RetroN 3 HD you need to have the controller dedicated to each system. So out of the box, the way it comes, you can't play NES games unless you buy a separate or have a separate controller. 4x3 16:9 mode, huge to me personally. The fact that the RetroN 3 HD does that, huge edge. You heard me talk about it during the gameplay footage. Really, the biggest weakness on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus is that lack of 4x3 16:9 selector switch. The fact that they have that new version that's coming out that doesn't have the composite output and still doesn't have that, still a miss in my books. PAL compatibility, overall a wash, although as you saw, the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus would not play my PAL version of Yoshi's Island, where the RetroN 3 HD did. No problem. So the RetroN 3 HD got a point there. Audio and video wise, for Super Mario Brothers, I thought that the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, taking the 4x3 16:9 out of it, looked and sounded better. Same thing on Darkwing Duck on the NES side, playing the PAL version. Street Fighter 2 Turbo, between the two of them, again, I thought the color palette and everything, the sound was better on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus than on the RetroN 3 HD. Again, the RetroN 3 HD, it's just dark across the board. Above and beyond that, Donkey Kong Country I thought was pretty much the same, except for the color palette. Didn't really award a point there. Virtual Racing does work on the RetroN 3 HD, does not work on the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, and running ROMs via an EverDrive on the Genesis side at least, the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus does not require you to set the system to PAL mode, where the RetroN 3 HD does. They both play it, they both work with EverDrives, however, it does play slower if you're playing Master System only. Genesis Mega Drive played just fine, so keep that in mind there. So by a score of almost 2-1, 8-4, my personal recommendation is the Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, as long as your TV can do 4x3, 16:9 natively. If it doesn't, I'd have to give the edge to the RetroN 3, even with the darker color palette, even with the fact that you need to buy a separate controller and everything, even with the overall design with the controller ports on the side. If that 4x3 16:9 is important to you, if Virtual Racing is important to you, if PAL Yoshi's Island is important to you, then go with the RetroN 3 HD. So these are my results, these are my opinions. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Was there anything that you wish that I would have tested that I didn't? I didn't want to make this an hour-long video. It's going to be long as it is, I'm afraid, to even start editing this as I'm closing it out here. But if you do have any other comments or questions, as always, leave it down below in the comment section. You can also email me at rocksolidmail@gmail.com. You can hit me up on Twitter at RockSolidStudios, Facebook at facebook.com/RockSolidProductions, or Instagram at instagram.com/RockSolidProductionsGK. Now, if you want to help support the future of Rock Solid Productions so we can do things like invest in newer mics, better lights, get some more EverDrive so that we can test things out, you can do so in a couple of different ways. First and foremost, head on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/rocksolid. We have a number of different tiers, and for as little as $1 a month, you can help support the channel. You get early access to our video content, exclusive content, and a whole lot more. You can also head on over to our Teespring store on screen right now and pick up some Rock Solid Production swag. T-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, and more, featuring the NES, Super NES, and N64 cartridge designs and the Rock Solid Productions logo. And everything that we do race through there gets put right back into the channel. Now, if you do want to pick up a Super Retro Trio 3 Plus, if you do want to pick up a Hyperkin RetroN 3 HD, do me a favor, head on over to CastlemaniaGames.com. And the cool thing about Castlemania Games is he has a feature called Castle Cash, where the more you spend, the more you earn towards future purchases. And Castle Cash is just like cash. It doesn't expire, it doesn't have any exclusions or anything along those lines. If you have $10 in Castle Cash, you have $10 to spend in the castle. You can also use promo code ROCKSOLID10 to save 10% off of most items on the website. I will have links down below where if you're looking for a Super Retro Trio 3 Plus or for either color variant of the RetroN 3 HD, you'll be able to find those at CastlemaniaGames.com. Take advantage of all those promos and savings on there too. And finally, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, if you like what you see here, if you want to see more, do me a huge favor. Hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that bell notification. And just let me know, what do you think of what we're doing here down in the comment section. My name is Gary, this has been Rock Solid Productions, and our battle between the Retrobit Super Retro Trio 3 Plus and the Hyperkin RetroN 3 HD. I thank you for watching, and I hope to see you soon.